Trade Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
In episode 23, Paul Stith, Director of Global Transportation Initiatives at Black Veatch, and I discuss a number of things around electric infrastructure. He explains the company's role in vehicle electrification, his experience with EVs, where we are with EV infrastructure development, the need for cooperation among a variety of parties, lessons learned from transit bus charging, and why fleets need to get involved with their electric vehicle programs now. Today we have joining me Paul Stith. He's the Director of Global Transportation Initiatives at Black Veatch. Hello, Paul. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Mike.
You know, I believe we met, kind of on the conference circuit or something, probably in the last couple of years, pretty recently. But I know we've been together speaking about, electric, medium, and heavy-duty trucks a few times, and now you're a board member with NACFE. But do you remember exactly what brought us together? I always like to kick this podcast off with how we met.
Perfect. Yeah. So, I think if we count pre-COVID and COVID times, the both of us probably speak between 20 and 40 or more times a year out and about. So if I recall correctly, we crossed paths a few different times at the Green Truck Summit, hosted there at the Work Truck Show in Indiana. And then there was something that was put together, it seems to me, by NREL, and they were, looking for some folks to get involved and engaged, and that was kind of a co-located or co-sponsored event. And I kind of came on board and chatted, and clearly some of the things I was saying resonated, and here we are with quite a few years already behind us as far as connecting on these topics.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and NACFE was really looking for a voice of the infrastructure side of electric trucks, and so I remember kind of putting out a call. Well, who knows infrastructure on electric trucks 2 or 3 years ago, and Black Veatch came up pretty quickly with the fleets and the truck builders out there. So tell us a bit about the company and sort of what your role and what Black Veatch's efforts are around scaling electric trucks.
Sure. So we're it's interesting. So Black Veatch is an employee-owned company. We're now about 106 years old and roughly 10,000 professionals around the world. So we're kind of that behind the scenes. You either know Black Veatch really well, and it could have been in water, could have been in communications, telecommunications, fiber optics, or power, renewable energy, all the way through all of the central assets that have been built around the world, really. So our mission in life is continued to grow and be more appreciated as a critical infrastructure builder. So we design, engineer, permit, and construct these assets across these categories. So within Black Veatch now, I've been here coming up on 6 years, and I came on board as a specialist, if you will, within the electrification space, and kind of follows on to kind of an interesting past of growing up in automotive and then being an early adopter in EV side. So we may chat about that at some point. And what I do with the company right now is look at what's coming, where are we going, what are the projects going to look like, and then within all of the things that Black Veatch can do, how do we pull that together for our clients and what the market is looking at. So if you look at anything that's kind of up and coming, and this whole segment of medium heavy-duty trucks is a perfect follow-on to the work we've already been doing in this, and I do the things that help with our clients from planning through to execution and looking at what ongoing operations will look like.
That's great, because as we do our work on electric trucks, this just how do we get the infrastructure, the big, construction projects and so forth. And so your company's passed and doing that in, cell phones and other things. Really, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're with the trucking industry. You mentioned it, so I don't want to forget about it. So you own an electric car, and what's been your experience driving and owning one?
Yeah, we got intrigued back in 2010 about what this looked like, and my wife and I actually, she's always a early adopter in a lot of things. and we ended up in the Moscone Center in San Francisco on one of the early Nissan Leaf tours, which was literally you went inside the building and that's where you test drove the vehicle. And, because it's electric, because you can. And it was just, super intrigued with it. And I started to dive into like, oh my gosh, how do you charge these things? What are we going to do with our cost of energy and all of these sort of things? And before I knew it, actually, my wife just ordered the car. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess we really need to figure it out. So we started back, and it was like we're this, two teenagers, two SUVs, big engines, all-wheel drive in the driveway, and we ended up getting this little Nissan Leaf, and it just kind of took over. We had a very nice premium SUV that sat next to the Leaf, and whether in the driveway or pulled in the garage, and that car just stood there. And for the first year, we just drove the wheels off of that, and it just became really clear and evident to us that was a way forward. Here we are, 2021, and we lease our vehicles, and that is something about with the technology moving so quickly and learning about it. But we have our 9th EV now, just coming on board, and
oh wow,
over 300,000 miles electric. The whole family, kids learned how to drive electric. We just made it work.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how for Letty and I to get in the EV game. I've had an electric lawnmower is about my claim to fame so far. Hey, so here we are, 2021, and there's basically a the trucks are coming. We got a lot of announcements. We got new production being put in place. The trucks are coming. So just give us, where are we with infrastructure right now in 2021? And let's start there. We'll talk about the future in a minute or two, but right now, where are we right now? And for those people considering putting an electric medium or heavy duty truck in the ground or in operation, how do they need to be thinking about charging, and what's sort of your top 3 points with them?
Sure. So first off, it's just, okay, a consumer can go out and say, I'd like to get an electric vehicle, and they can make that transition. They can kind of hunt around and, I've got an outlet, near where I park, or I can go into public, and I can figure it out, because electrons are frankly everywhere. You just need to get an access point to them. If you're in the truck side of things, you're just looking at a tremendous amount of energy that you're going to need to pull into those vehicles to displace their current fuel source. So where we are today is really a very steep and rapid learning curve. And I think what's going on is that we're seeing pilots, we're seeing getting early access to vehicles, and a lot of uptake interest. And then it's like, okay, great. So what do we do about that? And I think that is interesting, because it's an opportunity and it's a challenge, because it's back to almost the way I described our consumer experience, like, oh, we're doing this. Now I actually have to really figure it out. And I think that's kind of the stage we're at. And more people proverbial light bulb is coming on, and they're starting to get to like, okay, well, this means the facilities people are going to be involved. This means my utility is going to be involved. And that's totally different than saying, oh, I'm going to use the next electronic ignition, whiz-bang, or some other efficiency technology that just comes on the vehicle and then operates. So it really is that learning phase right now is where we're at.
Yeah, and I remember when NACB started the electric truck work, and we talked to a really big fleet about how this was happening, and the fleet manager said exactly what you just brought up, Paul. He said, I knew this was going to be different when I went into the room, and instead of having maybe 1 or 2 people in there where we were making decisions around, do we spec an automated transmission or a manual transmission? And maybe we had, the guy or lady in charge of drivers and somebody else, and we were making those decisions. Now, when he walked into the room to talk about buying electric trucks, I mean, construction and finance and facilities, and, it was full of people, because that's what it takes to make this happen. So, part of me wonders, Paul, are they just a whole bunch of fleets looking out there going, holy Moses, I'm not going to be the first to do this. I'm going to sit back and wait. for others. It doesn't feel that way, though. It feels like the industry sees this coming, and they're becoming educated, and they're trying to figure out a way to get 1 or 2 or 3 trucks into their operation, even if they're yard tractors to start with.
Definitely. I mean, and I think the other thing that you got to look at that's going on is different regions, different cities, certainly states have a lot of vested interest in the success of this transformation. So if you sit back and you don't get involved in learning about it and taking advantage, I'm going to call them early opportunities for funding and learning, then you're really missing out. So the good news is that there are many organizations, small and large, that are, kind of taking it upon themselves to get involved and see where this is going, and whether it's, diesel replacement funds, a federal program or a state program, or certainly the VW program that has funds scattered across all the states. Finding ways, a little niche to basically offset that cost of some of the upfront, before cost parity arrives, and really take advantage of how you can understand, because you really don't know, I got to say, until you know. And each organization will find a different path that they have to get started in order to really appreciate where that'll go.
Yeah, that's great. So I think this is a big point. So I want to shift gears into the future a little bit, but before we go there, right now here in 2021, we're encouraging fleets to find a truck builder, get a truck on order, try to get some funding through these streams of, you mentioned them, right? Whether it's the utility with funding for infrastructure or funding on the truck somehow, and get in the game, even if it's just 1 or 2 trucks in your fleet. That's so important to do. And that'll be, depot charging, maybe it's slow charging, overnight for some trucks that are sitting, but, get started. That point is really important that I think we're both trying to make here. So having made that point, let's look out into the future a little more. So what's your advice then when you want to make that next step, right? So now we're maybe charging 10 or 20 or 30 trucks at the site. Maybe we're thinking about public charging somewhere. I know you've got some work, or you support the CHAR-N efforts, but after this first phase of early adopters and depot charging and so forth, let's look out a little farther, Paul, and start. How does that look, and what are the keys to being successful there?
So I think it's something that the industry, needs to continually look at. Well, where is it going, right? How are the trucks being used? How are the routes being defined, going forward? I know there's a really high percentage of, vehicles that do return to base, and that has a lot to do with driver retention and just the distribution models, if you will. If we want to go further, though, let's just think about that. Is if you are out on the road, I do this all the time, is I look around at all of those vehicles, and they're going somewhere, particularly the big trucks. Get out on the I-5 or go near a port, the 710, or in the Bay Area where I'm up here near San Francisco. So look at those vehicles. Where are they going? And then how much fuel are they consuming? So then you look around a little bit more. It's something you might not have looked at, and that's the power grid. So you've got those big transmission towers that, are running power from where it was generated to where it's, going to be consumed, goes into substations. And then you've got big solar fields that are coming up, and you've got, distributed energy opportunities. So you have to actually think really hard about okay, well, where are those vehicles going to go, do their job, and where do they stop for a little while? And how does these wires that you now might be more aware of, where do they go? And how do we get those two things in the same place? So that's really the kind of the challenge. And when you start to think about that, a truck, it just needs, a half megawatt hour of energy. If you look at these buildings, you take a few trucks, and that's the entire skyscraper amount of power draw from the grid. So you have to kind of think about it. So in operationally, you mentioned charring. Do you want to run this like a fueling truck that you would do in a long haul scenario? Be able to fuel within a half an hour. And that is certainly something that is right on the drawing boards today. And it's being planned for and being understood and everything that's necessary to do that. Yet, where is that going to be? Is that going to be in the depot as a quick turnaround, or will it be out in a convenience truck stop of the future? And how do you put several of those so that you can actually mimic today's expectations on the fueling infrastructure, or modify operations to make it work?
That's really important. And modifying operations, we can't change everything. We need to make these trucks work in, sort of the current logistics footprint. I mean, it's clearly been built around diesel and gasoline powering these trucks, Class 3 to Class 8. But it needs to work within that, but maybe there's some adjustments to make. I mean, one of the things I think about is hours of service for the truck driver. There's all this debate about, when can they take their half an hour break? We got the split sleeper berth, and I don't profess to be an expert in the hours of service rule, but maybe maybe there's a way we could work that rule along with the opportunity to, encourage electrification of trucking, where, maybe that driver can have a 3-hour break in the middle of his driving time that allows for some of this charging to take place in, in sensible locations with the operations. Now, maybe I'm being way too optimistic about how, regulations get joined, but that something like that could be really helpful to scaling, particularly in the, in the midterm to the longer term of this transformation.
Yeah, if you take another look, and we've got a tremendous amount of experience that's directly relevant in transit and charging transit buses all over the country. Now, if you look at the way they tend to manage drivers, they have very fixed routes. They're known, they're on a schedule, and they actually have layovers. And a layover location could be for a driver to take a break. It also could be to change drivers to keep that vehicle moving. And so if you look in transit, what they've done in their operations is they definitely are charging in depots. And then in some cases, and we have one of these deployments in New York City, is that the buses could run theoretically 24 hours a day. And what they do is they charge at a couple of bus stops. So as you go back and forth across Manhattan, these stops are, 5-10 minutes. So at the most, and they're actually able to recover enough energy to actually do the rest of their service. So it's really integrating to the operations. Technology can advance to create all sorts of whiz-bang ways to do these things. And then we have to think about, how do you keep those assets, the vehicle assets and the humans doing, what their operational duty cycle looks like. Put the puzzle together.
Sure. And so as we think about, acting now and then into the future, this is one of the benefits of the complex trucking industry because, we definitely have, look at e-commerce, step vans. Those, many of those are not on the streets, in the evenings or overnight. They go do their work maybe from 5 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, and then many of those trucks sit around. We just don't want, as a public, those trucks in our neighborhoods, and on the streets, and in the rush hour and so forth. So they end up going back to base. My point is that there are some trucks that have relatively small battery packs that don't need a ton of charging, have long dwell times, and those are great places for, action now and adoption now. And we'll learn a lot about maintenance and operations and so forth there, which then can lead us into the next phase and the next phase. I mean, I think CalSTART calls those kind of waves of electrification in trucking. And I think the good news here is the diversity of the duty cycles and applications in trucking offer us, a pathway. We don't need to be perfect in the future with like long haul trucking. We can learn and scale along the way. You agree with that, Paul? And is that like an asset of the complexity that oftentimes we complain about in trucking?
Yeah, and I kind of used the word puzzle before, because there's the operational of the vehicles and in that puzzle to solve, and then on the other side is the grid and the marching forward into a clean energy grid, right? So it requires on both sides an orchestration to get the best, bang for your buck, if you will, on if we're going to go electric, let's also make sure that it has clean energy. So the grids that are out there and at every individual location, be it along a route or at a depot, frankly, they're actually just different. The amount of load on the grid at that place and the calendar, if you will, for that load over the 24 hours of the day and the seasonal, talk about an air conditioner load and so forth. All of that has to get orchestrated. And so the good news that I would say is there's an awful lot of work that's been done with the grid looking at how to integrate renewables. And then this is a new load that also has to be figured out, well, where is it? If you go, through a warehousing district, you have not one location, but you have potentially dozens of large locations that actually have all these vehicles. So to the grid, that's a hot spot, right? Of like new activity coming that has to be understood and looked at. So when you talk about things that drive during the day, things that drive in the evening, and clearly, kind of orchestrating it, it's also across all these different, customers and when they will bring their vehicles onto the grid.
That's really interesting. And, we've done a lot of work on regional haul, and you bring up this term warehouse districts. We recently saw an article in Chicago where they were talking about challenges in getting people to those warehouse districts to do sorting and other things. You bring up another key point, and that is that these warehouse districts will probably need a lot of power for these electric trucks. Are the utilities, do they see the opportunity, and are they getting aggressive here, Paul? Because it seems like a lot of these utilities, this work takes time. It's not anything you can do in a couple of months. It's more like, years in some cases. So are they coming on board with the opportunity here fast enough for the trucking industry?
I hope so, and I think so. So, one day I'll tell you, yeah, I think they get it and we're ready to go. And there are some that are leaders that are moving faster in this space. And then they're like, they're concerned, but they also have to find ways to act. So, utilities are our clients as well. So we build infrastructure, we build transmission lines, we are building these core assets for utilities. And then we work with them on planning processes as well. And I talk about that orchestration. Well, those are integrated resource plans, and we do that type of work. And all it comes back down to, though, is the capital and the funding. So each utility has perhaps different stakeholders and governments. So a public utility, municipal utility, a co-op, that, this could become the largest load of their entire existence. If they happen to have one of those warehousing districts, in their service territory. So I think they're catching on. I participate in SEPA, leading co-chair for the electrification group, and every day I see more and more utilities that are perking up and diving in to figure this out. So I'm very optimistic but it doesn't mean they don't have a lot of work to do.
You're kind of new to the trucking industry, so how excited are you about electrification of trucks, and what's your impression of the trucking industry, and why are you so excited about working with us and it to make this happen?
Well, everybody that I meet in this space, the logistics space, and all of the things that are out there, there's really a get her done attitude, right, and a resilience that plays across the entire industry, be it, putting chains on and going through the snow versus, a pleasant drive down the coast and scenic view. I think that this industry has actually taken on many, many challenges and that gives me a lot of optimism for everything that I've seen in being, they need to adapt. Now, that doesn't mean that, it's going to be overnight, but I do see that drive to work at it. And, and I do see that there's very much about a cost effectiveness. And as this technology and cost parity occur, you'll be losing money if you haven't electrified. So I think that drive to figure it out is very persistent, and it's great to watch the evolution. And I would say don't be shy. Reach out, get to some experts to help and understand where you're at and where you're trying to go.
Great advice, Paul. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate you and Black Veatch helping this industry on our journey to truck electrification. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Rosen Friends.